The sound of rustling leather and the quiet clink of metal broke through the stillness of the Wyoming dawn, and Austin Keller's eyes snapped open to find a woman's trembling hands buried deep in his saddlebag. She froze when their gazes met, her dirt-smudged face going pale in the pink light of morning, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then she stumbled backward, clutching a small bundle of dried meat and hardtack to her chest, and tears began streaming down her hollow cheeks as the words tumbled out in a desperate sob. "My baby is starving," she choked out, her voice cracking with raw anguish. "Please, I am sorry, but my baby is starving." Austin sat up from his bedroll, his hand instinctively moving away from the revolver at his hip as he took in the full picture of the woman before him. She could not have been more than 20 years old, her dark hair hanging in tangled waves around her thin shoulders, her dress torn and caked with trail dust. But it was her eyes that struck him most, those deep brown eyes that held such profound desperation and maternal fear that something in his chest tightened painfully. "Where is your baby?" he asked, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again, softer this time. "Where is the child?" She pointed with a shaking hand toward a cluster of rocks about 50 yards from where he had made camp the night before. "Hidden. I hid her. I did not want her to see if you caught me, if you hurt me." Austin rose slowly to his feet, careful to keep his movements non-threatening. The woman flinched anyway, taking another step back. She was ready to run, he could see it in the tension of her body, but she was also weak. He could tell from the way she swayed slightly, from the gauntness of her frame beneath the threadbare dress. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice level and calm. "What is your name?" She hesitated, her eyes darting between him and the rocks where she had hidden her child. "Delilah, Delilah Morrison." "Delilah," he nodded, committing the name to memory. "I am Austin Keller. When did you last eat?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. Her mouth opened, then closed, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do not know. 2 days, maybe 3. But Sarah, my daughter, she has not eaten in longer. I have been giving her what little I could find, but there has been so little." Austin felt something twist in his gut. He had been riding alone for weeks now, making his way from Montana down to Wyoming, taking jobs where he could find them. He was heading to Buffalo to meet with a rancher who needed help with a cattle drive, but that could wait a few hours. This woman and her child could not. "Go get your daughter," he said, moving toward his supplies. "I have food, enough for all of us." Delilah stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign tongue. "You are not going to turn me in. I tried to steal from you. You tried to feed your child." Austin began pulling out supplies, his movements efficient and practiced. "That is not a crime in my book. Now go get her before she gets too frightened waiting for you." Delilah did not need to be told twice. She dropped the food she had been clutching and ran toward the rocks with surprising speed for someone so weakened. Austin watched her go, then set about building up the fire he had banked the night before. Within minutes, he had flames crackling cheerfully, and he set a pot of water to boil. He had beans, salt pork, coffee, and even a few biscuits he had bought in the last town. It was not a feast, but it would do. When Delilah returned, she was carrying a small bundle wrapped in what looked like an old shawl. As she drew closer, Austin could see the pale face of a child peeking out, wide blue eyes staring at him with the solemn wariness of someone too young to have learned such caution. The girl could not have been more than 2 years old, her blonde hair matted and her cheeks hollow with hunger. "This is Sarah," Delilah said quietly, holding her daughter protectively against her chest. Austin nodded to the child, then gestured to the ground near the fire. "Sit. The food will be ready soon." Delilah sank down gratefully, never loosening her grip on Sarah. The little girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder, peeking out at Austin with those enormous eyes. He found himself making faces at her while he cooked, trying to coax out a smile. It did not work, but she did seem slightly less terrified by the time he handed Delilah a tin plate piled with beans and salt pork. "Feed her first," Austin said, "but make sure she eats slow. If she has not had much food lately, too much too fast will make her sick." Delilah nodded, her hands trembling as she took the plate. She broke off small pieces of the soft beans and fed them carefully to Sarah, who ate with the desperate intensity of the truly starving. Austin made himself busy preparing more food, giving them a semblance of privacy. He could hear Delilah murmuring encouragement to her daughter, her voice thick with emotion. When Sarah had eaten about half the plate, Delilah finally allowed herself to eat. Austin watched from the corner of his eye as she forced herself to take small bites, clearly fighting the urge to devour everything in sight. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how to thank you enough. I thought when you caught me, I thought you would shoot me or take me to the sheriff or worse." "I am not in the habit of shooting desperate mothers," Austin said, settling down across the fire from her. "How did you end up out here alone with a child?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. Delilah took a sip of coffee, her eyes distant. "My husband died 6 months ago. Fever took him in 3 days. We had a small homestead about 20 miles west of Buffalo, but I could not manage it alone. I tried. God knows I tried, but the crops failed and the few animals we had either died or got stolen. I had no family, no one to turn to. I thought maybe in Buffalo I could find work, but when I got there, no one would hire a woman with a baby. They said I would be more trouble than I was worth." Austin felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and sharp. He knew the world was not kind to women alone, especially those with children, but hearing it laid out so plainly made his jaw clench. "So you have been living out here?" he asked. "For the past week, yes. I have been trying to make my way east, toward my husband's brother in Nebraska. But I ran out of food and money, and Sarah got so weak I was afraid to keep traveling. I have been camping near the trail, hoping to beg from travelers or find something, anything." She looked down at her daughter, who had fallen asleep against her chest, finally full for the first time in days. "I saw you ride in last night and make camp. I waited until I thought you were asleep. I am not a thief, Mr. Keller. I have never stolen anything in my life before last night." "You do not need to explain yourself to me," Austin said. "And I am not going to judge you for trying to keep your child alive." Delilah looked up at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand what kind of man he was. "Why are you being so kind to us?" Austin considered the question. He could have given her a simple answer, something about Christian charity or basic decency. But the truth was more complicated than that. He had been alone for a long time, drifting from job to job, town to town. He had seen enough cruelty and hardness in the world to last a lifetime. Maybe that was why this woman and her child affected him so deeply. Maybe he was tired of the callousness, tired of the way people could look past suffering as if it did not concern them. "I guess I am tired of pretending I do not see when people need help," he said finally. "The world is hard enough without us making it harder for each other." Delilah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they seemed different. Not tears of desperation or fear, but something softer. "Thank you," she said again. "Truly." They sat in silence for a while, the morning sun climbing higher in the sky, warming the Wyoming landscape. The terrain here was beautiful in a stark way, all rolling grasslands and distant mountains, the sky so vast and blue it almost hurt to look at. Austin poured himself more coffee and tried to figure out what to do next. I was heading to Buffalo myself, he said after a while. Got a job lined up there. I could take you and Sarah with me, help you get settled somewhere safe. Delilah looked up sharply. You would do that? I would. He met her eyes steadily. But I need you to understand something. I am not expecting anything in return. I am not that kind of man. I will help you because it is the right thing to do, and then you can decide what you want to do next. Fair enough. More than fair. Delilah shifted Sarah in her arms, settling the sleeping child more comfortably. I do not know what I did to deserve your kindness, Mr. Keller, but I will not forget it. Call me Austin, he said. And you did not need to do anything to deserve basic human decency. That should just be a given. They broke camp an hour later after Delilah and Sarah had eaten more and rested. Austin saddled his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Red, and helped Delilah up onto the saddle. She sat with Sarah cradled against her, and Austin swung up behind them, reaching around to take the reins. It was close quarters, and he tried not to notice the way Delilah's hair smelled like sage and dust, or the way she felt small and fragile in front of him. The ride to Buffalo took most of the day. They stopped twice to rest and let Delilah feed Sarah more small portions of food. The little girl was still wary of Austin, but she had started to peek at him with what might have been curiosity rather than fear. He took that as progress. As they rode, Delilah told him more about her life. She had met her husband, Thomas, when she was 17. He had been a few years older, a hard-working man with dreams of building something lasting in Wyoming. They had married quickly and moved to the homestead, full of hope and determination. Sarah had been born a year later, and for a while, life had been good. Hard, but good. Then the fever came and everything fell apart. Thomas was a good man, she said quietly, her voice carrying back to Austin over the sound of hoofbeats. He loved Sarah so much. He would have done anything for her. I think he would have liked you, actually. He always said the measure of a man was in how he treated those who could do nothing for him. Austin felt something warm unfurl in his chest at her words. He sounds like he was worth knowing. He was. Delilah was quiet for a moment. I miss him every day, but I have to keep going for Sarah. She is all I have left of him. She is lucky to have a mother who fights so hard for her, Austin said. Delilah turned her head slightly, and he caught a glimpse of her profile, the straight line of her nose and the curve of her cheek. I do not feel very lucky right now. I feel like I have failed her. You have not failed anyone, Austin said firmly. You are doing everything you can in an impossible situation. That is not failure. That is courage. He felt Delilah lean back slightly, just enough that her back pressed against his chest. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant somehow. Like she was allowing herself to trust him, to accept his support in more than just words. Buffalo came into view as the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. It was a small town, but growing, with a main street lined with wooden buildings and the constant activity of a settlement on the edge of civilization. There was a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a sheriff's office, and various other establishments that served the needs of ranchers, cowboys, and travelers passing through. Austin guided Red down the main street, drawing a few curious looks from people on the boardwalks. He knew how they must look, a man and a woman and child on one horse, all of them dusty from travel. Let them look. He did not care about gossip. He stopped in front of the hotel, a 2-story building with a sign that read Buffalo Hotel and Boarding House in faded letters. Swinging down from the saddle, he helped Delilah down, taking care to support her as she steadied herself with Sarah in her arms. "Wait here," he said. "I will see about getting you a room." Delilah opened her mouth as if to protest, but Austin was already heading inside. The lobby was small but clean, with a desk where a middle-aged woman sat reading a newspaper. She looked up as Austin approached, her eyes assessing him with the practiced gaze of someone who had seen all types pass through her establishment. "I need a room," Austin said, "for a woman and her child. Somewhere safe and quiet." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Just the woman and child." "That is correct." "For how long?" Austin hesitated. "I am not sure yet, at least a few days, maybe longer." The woman quoted him a price that was reasonable enough. Austin paid for a week upfront, figuring that would give him time to help Delilah figure out her next steps. The woman handed him a key and gestured to the stairs. "Room 4, second floor. Clean sheets, water basin, and the privy is out back. Breakfast is served at 7 in the morning downstairs. No men allowed in the rooms after 9 at night." "Understood." Austin took the key and headed back outside. Delilah was right where he had left her, looking overwhelmed and exhausted. Sarah was awake now, staring at all the activity on the street with wide eyes. "Come on," Austin said gently. "Let me show you to your room." He led them inside and up the stairs, unlocking the door to room 4. It was simple but adequate, with a double bed, a washstand, a small table with 2 chairs, and a window that looked out over the main street. Delilah walked in slowly, as if she could not quite believe this was real. "I cannot afford this," she said, turning to face Austin. "I do not have any money." "I know," Austin said. "I paid for it. But I cannot let you do that. You have already done so much." Austin set his saddlebag down on the table. "Delilah, listen to me. You and Sarah need a safe place to stay, somewhere you can rest and recover. I have some money saved up, and I have a job starting in a few days that will pay well. Let me help you, please." Delilah looked like she was going to argue further, but then Sarah made a small sound and Delilah's face crumpled. "I do not know how I will ever repay you," she whispered. "You do not need to repay me," Austin said. "Just take care of yourself and your daughter. That is all I ask." He left them to settle in, promising to return with food and supplies. He spent the next hour visiting the general store, buying clothes for Delilah and Sarah, more food and other necessities. The store owner, an older man with a bushy white beard, gave him a knowing look as he tallied up the purchases. "Got yourself a family, son?" he asked. "Just helping out someone in need," Austin replied evenly. The man nodded, but his expression suggested he did not quite believe it. Small towns were like that, always eager for a story to tell. Austin did not care what they thought as long as Delilah and Sarah were taken care of. When he returned to the hotel, he knocked on the door to room 4. Delilah answered, and he was struck by how different she looked already. She had washed her face and attempted to tame her hair, and even though she was still wearing the same threadbare dress, there was more life in her eyes. "I brought some things," Austin said, handing her the packages. "Clothes for you and Sarah, some food, and a few other supplies I thought you might need." Delilah took the packages with trembling hands. "Austin, this is too much." "It is what you need," he corrected gently. "Now I am going to go get myself a room, and then I will come back and we can have dinner. There is a decent restaurant down the street." "I should stay here with Sarah," Delilah said quickly. "She is still so unsettled." Austin nodded. "Then I will bring dinner to you. What do you like?" Delilah looked at him as if he had asked her something in a foreign language. "I have not had a choice in what I eat in so long. I do not even know how to answer that." "Then I will surprise you," Austin said with a small smile. "I will be back in an hour." He secured his own room, took care of Red at the livery stable, and then went to the restaurant. He ordered stew, fresh bread, and apple pie, asking them to pack it up so he could take it with him. The owner gave him the same knowing look the store owner had, but Austin ignored it. When he returned to Delilah's room, she had changed into one of the dresses he had bought, a simple blue cotton that actually fit her properly. Sarah was wearing a new dress too, pink with tiny white flowers, and she looked like a different child. Clean, with her hair brushed, she was actually quite adorable. They ate together at the small table, Sarah sitting on her mother's lap and eating small bites of bread soaked in stew. The little girl kept sneaking glances at Austin, and at one point, she even gave him a tentative smile. It felt like a victory. "This is the best meal I have had in months," Delilah said, her eyes closing briefly in appreciation. "Maybe years. I had forgotten what it felt like to be full." "You will have plenty more," Austin assured her. "I meant what I said about helping you get back on your feet." "Why?" Delilah asked suddenly, setting down her spoon. "Why are you doing all of this? You do not even know me." Austin leaned back in his chair, considering his answer. "My mother died when I was 10, he said slowly. "It was just me and my father after that, and he was not a kind man. He drank, and when he drank, he got mean. I ran away when I was 14, been on my own ever since. I learned early that the world was not going to hand me anything, that I had to fight for every scrap. But I also learned that there were still good people out there, people who would help a scared kid even when they did not have to." He paused, meeting Delilah's eyes. "A few times when things were really bad, someone showed me kindness. A rancher who gave me work and asked no questions. A woman in a town whose name I have forgotten who fed me when I was half-starved. They did not have to help me, but they did, and it made all the difference. I guess I am trying to be that person for someone else now." Delilah reached across the table and placed her hand over his. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact, and Austin felt his breath catch slightly. Her hand was small and rough with work, but warm. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing us, for caring." Austin turned his hand over, gently squeezing her fingers. "It is easy to care about you," he said, and then immediately wondered if he had said too much. But Delilah did not pull away. Instead, she smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "You are a good man, Austin Keller, better than most I have known." They sat like that for a long moment, hands linked across the table, Sarah dozing between them. It felt intimate and significant, like they were acknowledging something neither of them was quite ready to name yet. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Austin would come by in the mornings to have breakfast with Delilah and Sarah. Then he would spend the day working odd jobs around town while they rested and recovered. In the evenings, he would return and they would have dinner together, sometimes in the room, sometimes at the restaurant. Sarah gradually warmed up to Austin, to the point where she would reach for him when he arrived, her little face lighting up. He bought her a small wooden doll from the general store, and she clutched it like treasure, showing it to him repeatedly with serious importance. Delilah bloomed under the care and rest. Color returned to her cheeks, and she gained back some of the weight she had lost. She was beautiful, Austin realized, not in the delicate way of women in magazines, but in a strong, real way that took his breath. She had a quick mind and a dry sense of humor that surprised him, and she was not afraid to speak her mind. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about how she had always wanted to see the mountains. He told her about his years drifting, about the places he had been, and the things he had seen. They were both, in their own ways, people who had been knocked down by life. But they were still standing, still fighting. On the fourth day, Austin had to meet with the rancher about the cattle drive job. It turned out the drive would not start for another 2 weeks, which gave him unexpected time. The rancher, a gruff man named McAllister, offered him work in the meantime helping with repairs around the ranch. Austin accepted, grateful for the steady income. When he told Delilah about the delay, he expected her to be relieved that he would be around longer. Instead, she looked troubled. "Austin, You should not put your life on hold for us, she said. They were sitting on a bench outside the hotel, watching Sarah play with some other children in the street. It was the first time the little girl had interacted with other kids, and Delilah's eyes kept drifting to her daughter with a mixture of joy and worry. I am not putting my life on hold, Austin said. I am still working. The cattle drive just does not start for a while yet. But you are spending all your free time with us. You must have other things you want to do. Austin looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the way the afternoon sun caught the hints of red in her dark hair, the way her eyes held both strength and vulnerability. There is nowhere else I would rather be, he said honestly. Delilah's breath caught. Austin. I know it is fast, he continued, unable to stop himself now. I know we have only known each other a few days. But Delilah, I cannot remember the last time I looked forward to something as much as I look forward to seeing you each day. You and Sarah, you have brought something into my life that I did not even know was missing. What is that? Delilah asked softly. Purpose, connection, hope. He reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I know you are still grieving your husband. I know you are in a difficult situation. I am not trying to rush you or push you into anything. I just want you to know that I care about you, both of you. Delilah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I care about you too, she admitted. More than I probably should, given everything. Part of me feels guilty, like I am betraying Thomas's memory. But another part of me feels alive again for the first time since he died. Thomas would want you to be happy, Austin said. Any man who truly loved you would want that. He would have, Delilah agreed. He was not a jealous or possessive man. He always said life was too short to waste on negative emotions. She looked down at their joined hands. I think he would have approved of you. You are like him in some ways, good to your core. Austin felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. I am going to take that as the highest compliment. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Sarah play. The little girl was laughing, a sound that Austin had not heard before, and it was like music. She was so resilient, so quick to bounce back now that she was safe and fed. Children were remarkable that way. What happens after the cattle drive? Delilah asked eventually. Where will you go? Austin had been thinking about that question himself. Normally, he would just move on to the next job, the next town. He had no ties, no reason to stay anywhere. But that was before. I am not sure, he admitted. I have enough saved up now that I could think about settling down somewhere if I wanted to, maybe buy some land, start a small ranch. I have always thought about it, but it never seemed worth it when it was just me. And now. Delilah's voice was barely above a whisper. Now I am thinking maybe it would be worth it if I had someone to share it with. Delilah turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his. Are you saying what I think you are saying? Austin took a deep breath. This was faster than he had ever moved with anyone, faster than he had ever imagined moving. But it felt right in a way that nothing else in his life ever had. I am saying that I want to build something with you, Delilah. I want to give you and Sarah a home, a real home. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to watch Sarah grow up. I want all of it if you will have me. A tear slipped down Delilah's cheek. We have known each other less than a week. I know. This is crazy. I know that too. But it also feels right, she said, her voice trembling. It feels like maybe the universe brought you to me exactly when I needed you most. So what do you say? Austin asked, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Delilah smiled through her tears. I say yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to building something together. Yes to taking a chance on this on us. Austin pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She melted into his embrace, and for a long moment they just held each other. It felt like coming home, like finding something he had not even known he was searching for. Sarah noticed them eventually and came running over, throwing herself at them with the enthusiasm only a 2-year-old could muster. Austin scooped her up with one arm, keeping the other around Delilah, and the little girl giggled as she patted his cheeks with her small hands. "You are good," she pronounced seriously, as if she had been holding judgment until now. "I try to be," Austin said, grinning at her. "Love Mama," Sarah added, pointing at Delilah. "I do," Austin agreed. "I love your mama very much." Delilah made a small sound, half laugh and half sob, and kissed his cheek. "I love you too," she whispered against his skin. "I do not know how it happened so fast, but I do." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of happiness and planning. Austin continued working at the McAllister Ranch during the days, and in the evenings, he and Delilah would talk about their future. They decided to look for land near Buffalo after the cattle drive, somewhere with good water and grazing. Austin had been saving money for years with no real purpose, and now he had one. He wanted to build Delilah and Sarah the home they deserved. They also decided to get married before the cattle drive. It was practical in many ways, giving Delilah the legal protection of being his wife, but it was also what they both wanted. Neither of them saw a reason to wait when they were both certain of their feelings. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church in Buffalo with just a handful of witnesses. Delilah wore a new dress, cream-colored with lace at the collar, that Austin had bought for the occasion. Sarah wore her pink dress and carried her wooden doll, looking solemn and important as she stood beside her mother. When Austin saw Delilah walking toward him down the aisle, his throat tightened with emotion. She was beautiful, but more than that, she looked happy. The haunted look that had been in her eyes when he first met her was gone, replaced by hope and love and excitement for the future. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through good times and bad. Austin barely heard the words, too focused on Delilah's face, on the way her hand trembled slightly in his. When it came time for the vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you and protect you and Sarah for as long as I live," he said. "I promise to build a home with you, to work beside you, to be your partner in all things. I promise to be the man you deserve, the man I see reflected in your eyes." Delilah's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to love you with all my heart, to trust you, to build a life with you. You saved me and my daughter when we had nothing and no one. You gave us hope when I had none left. I promise to spend every day showing you how grateful I am, how much I love you, how much you mean to us." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed her gently, aware of Sarah watching them with wide eyes. The little girl clapped her hands together, clearly pleased with this development, and everyone in the small church laughed. After the ceremony, they had a simple meal at the restaurant with the few people who had attended. The rancher McAllister was there with his wife, a kind woman named Ruth, who had taken an immediate liking to Delilah. The hotel owner came, and the minister and his wife. It was small but perfect, exactly what they wanted. That night, their wedding night, they put Sarah to bed in the room next to theirs that Austin had rented. The little girl went down easily, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Then Austin and Delilah were alone for the first time as husband and wife. There was a moment of nervousness, an awareness of the significance of what they were doing. But then, Austin cupped Delilah's face in his hands and kissed her, and everything else fell away. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies, expressing with touch what words could not quite capture. It was not just physical, though that aspect was wonderful. It was spiritual, emotional, a joining of two souls who had found each other against all odds. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow hotel bed, Delilah's head resting on Austin's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. "Are you happy?" he asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Happier than I have been in a very long time," Delilah replied. "I never thought I would feel this way again. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. I was just focused on surviving, on keeping Sarah alive. I never imagined falling in love again." "Neither did I," Austin admitted. "I thought I was meant to be alone. It was easier that way, or so I told myself. No attachments, no one to worry about or disappoint. But now I realize I was just afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of wanting something this much. Of caring about someone so deeply that losing them would destroy me." He tightened his arms around her. "But I would rather have this, have you, for whatever time we get than spend my whole life playing it safe and being alone." Delilah lifted her head to look at him, her eyes shining in the dim light. "You are not going to lose me," she said fiercely. "We are going to have a long, happy life together. We are going to raise Sarah and maybe have more children. We are going to build our ranch and grow old together. I am not going anywhere." Austin smiled and pulled her down for another kiss. "Promise?" "I promise," she whispered against his lips. The cattle drive started 2 days later. It was hard leaving Delilah and Sarah, even though he knew they were safe in Buffalo with Ruth McAllister checking on them daily. The drive would take about 6 weeks there and back, moving a herd of cattle to the railhead in Cheyenne. It was good money, enough to make a real start on buying land and building a house. The work was brutal. Long days in the saddle under the hot Wyoming sun, sleeping on the hard ground, eating trail food. But Austin did not mind. He had something to work toward now, something to come home to. At night, lying in his bedroll under the stars, he would think about Delilah and Sarah, about the life they were going to build together. The other cowboys noticed the change in him. He was quieter than usual, less interested in the drinking and gambling that happened when they stopped in towns along the way. When they teased him about being lovesick, he just smiled and did not deny it. He was lovesick, and he was not ashamed of it. He wrote letters to Delilah whenever they passed through a town with a post office, long letters describing what he was seeing, what he was thinking, how much he missed her. He was not much of a writer, but he tried his best to put his feelings into words. He told her about his plans for the ranch, asked her opinion on various things, shared his dreams for their future. Delilah wrote back faithfully, her letters full of news about Sarah and life in Buffalo. The little girl was thriving, making friends with other children in town, learning new words every day. Delilah had started doing sewing work for some of the local women, earning a bit of money and making connections. She wrote about how Ruth had become a good friend, how the people of Buffalo had been welcoming once they understood her situation. But more than the practical news, her letters were full of love and longing. She missed him desperately, she wrote. She counted the days until he would return. She loved him more with each passing day, loved the life they were building together, loved the man he was. Austin kept her letters folded in his shirt pocket, close to his heart. He read them over and over, especially on the hard days when his body ached and exhaustion pulled at him. They were his talisman, his reminder of what waited for him. The cattle drive went smoothly for the most part. There was one bad storm that scattered the herd and required 2 days of hard work to round them back up. There was a river crossing that nearly ended in disaster when one of the younger cowboys got swept downstream, though they managed to pull him out in time. There were the usual minor injuries and illnesses that came with life on the trail. But Austin stayed safe and healthy, driven by his need to get back to his family. His family. The word still felt new and wonderful in his mind. He had a wife and a daughter now, people who depended on him, people he would do anything for. When the drive finally ended and he collected his pay, Austin immediately began the journey back to Buffalo. He pushed Red harder than he probably should have, eager to close the distance between himself and home. The gelding seemed to understand his urgency and responded gamely, eating up the miles with his steady, ground-covering stride. It was late afternoon when Austin finally rode into Buffalo, dusty and trail-worn but grinning like a fool. He went straight to the hotel, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He knocked on the door to what had been Delilah's room, his heart pounding with anticipation. The door flew open, and there she was. Delilah looked even more beautiful than he remembered, her face lighting up when she saw him. She threw herself into his arms with a cry of joy, and Austin lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as he buried his face in her hair. "You are home," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "You are finally home." "I am home," he agreed, setting her down but not letting go. "God, I missed you. I missed you too, so much." She pulled back just enough to look at his face, her hands cupping his cheeks. "You look tired." "I am," he admitted, "but I am here and that is all that matters." A small voice from inside the room called out, "Austin." He looked past Delilah to see Sarah standing by the bed, her wooden doll clutched in one hand. She looked uncertain, as if she was not quite sure if she remembered him correctly. "Hey there, sweetheart," Austin said, crouching down to her level. "Did you miss me?" Sarah studied him for a moment, then her face broke into a huge smile. "Austin!" she shrieked, running toward him. He caught her up in his arms, and she wrapped her little arms around his neck in a strangling hug. "I missed you so much," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Did you take good care of your mama while I was gone?" "Yes," Sarah said seriously. "I was very good." "She was perfect," Delilah confirmed, her eyes wet with happy tears. "She asked about you every single day." They spent the evening together, catching up properly. Austin told them about the cattle drive in more detail than his letters had contained, leaving out the truly dangerous or difficult parts. He did not want to worry them. Delilah told him about everything that had happened in Buffalo, about the friends she had made and the work she had been doing. After they put Sarah to bed, Austin and Delilah finally had time alone. They made love with the urgency of people who had been separated too long, relearning each other, reconnecting in the most intimate way possible. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Austin told her about his plans. "I have enough money now to buy land and start building," he said. "I have already been looking at a few parcels near here. There is one in particular I think you will love. It has a creek running through it, good grass, and a stand of cottonwood trees that would be perfect for building near." "When can we see it?" Delilah asked eagerly. "Tomorrow, if you want. The owner is willing to sell and the price is fair." They went to look at the land the next day, all 3 of them riding together on Red. The property was everything Austin had described and more. It was about 5 miles from Buffalo, close enough to town to be convenient but far enough to have privacy. The creek was clear and cold, fed by springs in the hills to the west. The grass was lush, perfect for cattle or horses. And the cottonwood trees formed a beautiful grove that would provide shade in the summer. Delilah fell in love with it immediately. She walked around with Sarah on her hip, pointing out where the house should go, where they could have a garden, where Sarah could play safely. Her excitement was contagious, and Austin found himself grinning as he watched her. "This is it," she said, turning to face him. "This is perfect. This is home." Austin bought the land the next day, shaking hands with the seller and signing the papers that made it officially theirs. Then he hired a crew to start building. He had a clear vision of what he wanted. A solid, sturdy house with enough room for their family to grow, a barn for animals, a chicken coop, and eventually corrals and outbuildings as they expanded. He worked alongside the crew, putting in long hours to get the house built before winter. Delilah came out every day with Sarah, bringing lunch and watching the progress. Sometimes she would pitch in, helping with lighter tasks. Sarah played in the grass, chasing butterflies and making up elaborate games with her doll. It took 2 months to get the house livable. It was not completely finished, but it had walls and a roof, windows and doors, and a working fireplace. The day they moved in was one of the happiest of Austin's life. They carried their few possessions into the house, and Delilah immediately began making it a home, arranging their things, hanging curtains she had sewn, placing wildflowers in jars on the table. That night, they sat together by the fireplace, Sarah asleep between them on a pile of blankets. The house smelled like fresh wood and the stew Delilah had cooked for dinner. Outside, the Wyoming night was full of stars, and the sound of the creek was a gentle murmur in the distance. "Are you happy?" Austin asked, echoing the question he had asked on their wedding night. Delilah smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible. You have given me everything, Austin. A home, security, love. You have given Sarah a father and a future. I do not think I can ever thank you enough." "You do not need to thank me," Austin said, kissing the top of her head. "You have given me just as much. You have given me a reason to build something lasting, a reason to put down roots. You have given me love and purpose and joy. We are even." "We are more than even," Delilah murmured. "We are blessed." Life on the ranch quickly fell into a comfortable rhythm. Austin spent his days working the land, gradually building up a small herd of cattle and some horses. Delilah took care of the house and garden and continued taking and sewing work from town. Sarah grew like a weed, becoming more talkative and confident every day. They made friends with their neighbors, other ranchers and homesteaders in the area. There were barn raisings and community gatherings, church on Sundays, and social events in Buffalo. They were part of something now, part of a community. It was a new experience for Austin, who had spent so much of his life as an outsider, and he found that he liked it. But his favorite times were the quiet evenings at home, just the three of them. He would sit in the chair he had built, watching Delilah sew by lamplight while Sarah played at their feet. Sometimes they would sing, simple songs that Delilah taught them. Sometimes they would just talk, sharing their thoughts about the day, making plans for the future. On their first wedding anniversary, Austin surprised Delilah with a gift. He had been working on it secretly for months, carving it from a piece of cottonwood. It was a jewelry box, simple but beautifully made, with their initials carved on the lid along with the date of their wedding. Delilah cried when he gave it to her, holding it like it was the most precious thing in the world. "It is beautiful," she said. "You made this." "I did," Austin confirmed. "I wanted you to have something special, something that would last." "Everything you have given me has been special," Delilah said, setting the box aside so she could wrap her arms around him. "But this is from your hands, your heart. I will treasure it always." She had a gift for him, too. It was a shirt she had sewn from fabric she had been saving, dark blue with careful stitching. But more than that, she had news. "I am pregnant," she said softly, taking his hands and placing them on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Austin felt like all the air had been knocked out of his lungs. A baby. Their baby. He was going to be a father, not just a stepfather to Sarah, but a father to a child of his own blood. "Are you happy?" Delilah asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know we have not talked about it much, but I thought." Austin cut her off with a kiss, pouring all his joy and love and excitement into it. When he finally pulled back, he was grinning so hard his face hurt. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," he said. "I am thrilled, delighted." Over the moon. When? Late spring, the doctor thinks. April or May. Austin did some quick math. So we will have a new baby right around calving season. That will be interesting, Delilah laughed. Trust you to think of the practical aspects. I was worried you might think it was too soon. Too soon? Austin shook his head. Delilah, I want a dozen children with you if we are blessed with that many. I want our house to be full of life and laughter and love. I want to build something that will last long after we are gone. A dozen might be a bit ambitious, Delilah said dryly. But I am glad you are happy about this one. They told Sarah that night, explaining as best they could to a 3-year-old that she was going to be a big sister. Sarah was fascinated by the idea, placing her small hand on Delilah's belly and asking when the baby would come out to play. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Delilah bloomed with it, her happiness making her radiant despite the discomforts. Austin fussed over her, not letting her lift anything heavy, making sure she rested enough. Ruth McAllister came out regularly to check on her, and the other ranch women in the area brought food and baby clothes and advice. Winter came, covering the land in snow and forcing them to stay close to the house. It was a cozy time, the three of them together in the warmth of the fireplace while the world outside was cold and white. Austin continued working on the house when weather permitted, finishing the interior and making improvements. He built furniture, repaired and expanded the barn, and planned for the spring. By the time the snow melted and green began to return to the land, Delilah was heavily pregnant. She moved more slowly now, one hand always resting on her belly. Sarah was endlessly fascinated by the baby, talking to it through Delilah's stomach, telling it about her day and her doll and all the important things in her young life. The baby came on a warm April afternoon, arriving faster than expected. Austin rode hard to fetch Ruth, who served as midwife for the area, but by the time they returned, Delilah had already done most of the work. With Ruth's guidance and Austin's terrified support, she brought their son into the world. He was perfect. Small and red-faced and screaming his displeasure at being forced out of his warm, comfortable home, but absolutely perfect. Austin held him for the first time with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he looked at this tiny person he and Delilah had created together. "What should we name him?" Delilah asked from the bed, exhausted but glowing with joy. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite decided. Now, looking at his son, Austin knew. "Thomas," he said softly, "if that is all right with you. To honor your first husband, the man who loved you before I did." Delilah's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. He was Sarah's father and he deserves to be remembered. Our son can carry his name with pride." "Thomas Austin Keller," Delilah said, testing it out. "It is perfect." "Thank you, my love." Sarah was allowed to meet her baby brother once Ruth had cleaned everything up and declared mother and baby healthy. She climbed carefully onto the bed, peering at the tiny bundle in Delilah's arms with wide eyes. "He is so small," she whispered, as if afraid she might break him with her voice. "You were that small once," Delilah told her, "but you are a big girl now and you are going to be the best big sister in the whole world." Sarah nodded solemnly, reaching out one finger to touch Thomas's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled reflexively around hers and Sarah gasped in delight. "He likes me. Of course he does," Austin said, sitting on the edge of the bed and putting his arm around all of them. "How could he not? You are wonderful." That night, after Ruth had gone home and Sarah was asleep in her bed, Austin sat in the rocking chair he had built for Delilah, holding his son while his wife rested. He looked down at Thomas's sleeping face, at the tiny features that were still forming, and felt overwhelmed with love and responsibility. This child would depend on him for everything. He would need to be taught and protected and guided. Austin would have to be strong and wise and patient. He would have to be the kind of father he had never had himself. But as he looked over at Delilah sleeping peacefully in their bed, at Sarah's little foot sticking out from under her blanket in the corner, at the home they had built together, Austin felt confident that he could do it. He had never expected this life, never imagined he could be this happy. But here he was, a husband and father, a rancher with land and a future. All because he had chosen kindness when he found a desperate woman stealing from his saddlebag. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch grew steadily as Austin worked hard and made smart decisions. They added more cattle, bred horses, and expanded their land through careful purchases. Delilah's sewing business grew into something more, and she eventually opened a small shop in Buffalo where she sold not just sewing but also preserves and baked goods. Sarah started school in town, proving to be bright and eager to learn. Thomas grew into a cheerful, energetic boy with his mother's dark hair and his father's steady temperament. When he was 2, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again, and this time they had a daughter they named Emma. 2 years after Emma came another son, James. Their house was indeed full of life and laughter and love, just as Austin had hoped. There were hard times too. A drought one year that nearly broke them. A winter so harsh they lost a third of their herd. Illnesses and injuries, and the constant worry that came with raising children and running a ranch. But they faced everything together, their love for each other only deepening with time and shared challenges. Sarah grew into a beautiful young woman, strong and capable like her mother, kind and steady like Austin, who she called Pa without hesitation from the time she was 4. When she was 20, she married the son of a neighboring rancher, a good man named Daniel who clearly adored her. Austin walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, struggling with the bittersweet reality of watching his daughter become a wife herself. Thomas showed an aptitude for horses and spent his teenage years learning to train them. By the time he was 21, he had a reputation throughout the territory for his skill. He eventually partnered with Austin to expand that side of the ranch, breeding and selling quality horses to the Army and to ranchers throughout Wyoming and beyond. Emma was the wild one, always exploring, always questioning, always pushing boundaries. She kept them on their toes but also kept them laughing. She had no interest in traditional women's work, preferring to ride and rope alongside her brothers. Delilah worried sometimes that Emma would never settle down, but Austin just laughed and said the world needed women who knew their own minds. James was the quiet one, thoughtful and studious. He loved books and learning, and when he was old enough, he went to college in the East, the first in their family to do so. He eventually became a lawyer, though he returned to Wyoming to practice, unable to stay away from home for long. Through it all, Austin and Delilah remained the steady center of their growing family. They aged together, their hair graying, their bodies wearing from years of hard work, but their love never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time and trials into something unbreakable. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. The ranch house, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, was filled with people. Their children and their spouses, their grandchildren running around underfoot, neighbors and friends from Buffalo and beyond. There was food and music and dancing, stories told and memories shared. Austin stood with his arm around Delilah, looking at everything they had built together, at the life that had grown from that desperate morning when he had found her stealing from his saddlebag. It seemed impossible that so much joy could have come from such a dark moment. But that was life, he supposed. You never knew when something terrible might actually be the beginning of something wonderful. What are you thinking about? Delilah asked, leaning into him. About how lucky I am, Austin said honestly. About how glad I am that you tried to steal my jerky. Delilah laughed, the sound as beautiful to him now as it had been the first time he heard it. Best theft I ever attempted, though I was a terrible thief, getting caught so easily. I am grateful you were, Austin said, pressing a kiss to her temple. I am grateful for every single moment since. Even the hard times, especially the hard times, they made us stronger. They made us appreciate the good times more. He turned her in his arms so he could look at her properly. I love you, Delilah Keller. I have loved you since the moment I saw you crying over your starving baby. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. I love you too, Delilah said, tears shining in her eyes. You saved my life, Austin. You and Sarah, you gave me a reason to keep going when I had none. And then you gave me so much more. A home, a family, a love I thought I would never have again. You are my heart, my partner, my everything. They kissed, surrounded by the noise and love of their family, and it felt just like that first kiss 25 years ago, full of promise and hope and endless possibility. As the years continued to pass, Austin and Delilah gradually stepped back from the day-to-day running of the ranch, turning more responsibility over to Thomas and his wife, who had moved into a house they built on the property. They became the matriarch and patriarch of a sprawling family, their wisdom and experience valued, their presence cherished. They spent their days doing the things they loved. Delilah continued her sewing, now making clothes for grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She taught the girls in the family her skills, passing down not just techniques but stories and traditions. Austin still worked with the horses, unable to fully retire from the thing he loved most besides his family. He taught his grandsons to ride, to train, to understand the animals in their care. But mostly, they spent time together. They would sit on the porch of the house Austin had built with his own hands all those years ago, watching the sun set over the land they had made their own. They would hold hands and talk about everything and nothing, still finding new things to learn about each other even after all these years. When Austin was 78 years old, he fell ill with a fever that would not break. Delilah nursed him stubbornly, refusing to accept that this might be the end. Their children came, and their grandchildren, filling the house once more with the sounds of family. Austin drifted in and out of consciousness, but whenever he woke, Delilah was there, holding his hand, whispering words of love and encouragement. On his last day, he opened his eyes to find her beside him, her hair completely white now, her face lined with age but still beautiful to him. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Do not cry, my love," he whispered, his voice weak but steady. "We had a good life, a wonderful life." "The best life," Delilah agreed, clutching his hand, "but I am not ready to say goodbye." "Neither am I," Austin admitted. "But we do not get to choose the timing. We only get to choose how we live the time we have. And I lived mine loving you." "I love you so much," Delilah said, leaning down to rest her forehead against his. "I will love you forever." "Forever," Austin echoed. "That is exactly how long I will love you." He closed his eyes then, his hand still in hers, and slipped peacefully away. Delilah held him for a long time, mourning the loss of her partner, her love, the man who had given her everything. But even in her grief, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for every moment they had shared, every laugh and tear, every sunrise and sunset. Gratitude for the family they had built together, the legacy they would leave behind. Austin was buried on the ranch he had loved, in a spot overlooking the creek where he had first shown Delilah their land. The entire territory seemed to come out for the funeral, testament to the kind of man he had been, the lives he had touched. Delilah lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them bearing the mark of the love Austin and Delilah had shared. She told stories about him constantly, keeping his memory alive, making sure that every child knew about the cowboy who had chosen kindness when he found a desperate woman stealing from his saddlebag. When she finally passed, peaceful in her sleep at 83, she was buried beside Austin. Their graves overlooked the land they had built together, marked by simple stones that bore their names and dates and a single word that summed up everything they had been to each other: beloved. Their descendants continued to work the ranch for generations, expanding and adapting with the times, but never forgetting the foundation that Austin and Delilah had laid. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to every new generation. The tale of a cowboy who caught a woman stealing from his saddlebag, who heard her cry that her baby was starving, and who chose compassion over judgment, who chose love over loneliness, who chose to build something lasting in a wild and unforgiving land. And in that choice, in that moment of kindness on a Wyoming morning, an entire world had been born. A world of love and family and home. A world that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most desperate moments. That sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a beginning. That sometimes, when you open your heart to another person's pain, you open the door to more joy than you ever imagined possible.